Afghanistan's security is put to the test as campaigning starts for a landmark presidential election. Polls in April will mark the first ever democratic transfer of power. But after nearly 13 years of struggling for peace, is Afghanistan ready to go it alone? This is Inside Story. Hello there, I'm Shuli Ghosh. Welcome to the programme. It's an election raising hope and the spectre of yet more violence. Even as Afghanistan's presidential campaign was due to begin, 2 aides of a leading candidate were shot dead. It's prompting the inevitable question, can the country ensure a safe election and a secure future as foreign troops prepare to leave? Jane Ferguson in Kabul reports on a mood of cautious optimism and uncertainty.
People in Kabul will have these faces staring down at them for the next 2 months. Men with powerful aspirations. As presidential election campaigns kick off, the candidates are finally allowed to put up posters across the capital. Several frontrunners held large gatherings in the capital, hoping to compete with big turnouts and rousing speeches. But there were problems. As one candidate's followers fought with those of his deputy over men and women playing in a band together. Some, however, say that the potential for cheating could make campaigns meaningless.
We expect the campaigns to be more comprehensive. We expect different teams to come up with comprehensive programs for the country and their vision and how they're going to implement the vision. But at the same time, we know that behind the scenes, they will be busy trying to figure out how to stuff boxes.
Campaigning outside the capital will be important and potentially more vulnerable to ethnic and tribal influences. Some worry the country's ethnic divide could be exploited.
That's one of the concerns, and all 5 regions we talk to people, they have that people, or particularly the candidates, or might be using ethnic groups, religious groups, and their tribes in order to get their votes. So that's something they're trying to stop that at national level, and trying to stop that at the provincial and district level, where they might be talking to the candidate supporters, not to use that, not to divide the country on these lands. So it should be a national process, and people should vote for anybody that they like it.
The numerous threats to Afghanistan's presidential elections are so grave, some believe the vote may not take place. But despite concerns over security, corruption and divisions across the country, Sunday's launch of the campaign is a crucial start. Jane Ferguson for Inside Story, Kabul, Afghanistan.
So let's see what our guests think about the upcoming election. In Kabul, we have Sadiq Siddiqui, spokesman for Afghanistan's Ministry of Interior. In Dubai, Peter Middlebrook, CEO of the consultancy firm Geopolicity and a former advisor to the Afghan government. And joining us from Kabul is Ahmad Nader Naderi, founder and chairman of the Free and Fair Election Forum of Afghanistan. Gentlemen, welcome to the programme. Sadiq, let's start by talking about what's important to voters. A recent poll, of course, not surprisingly, said that security is top of the list. And the security situation being handed over by Hamid Karzai is a very tense one, isn't it?
I would like to say hi to all the participants and the guests to your program. Yes, of course, security is one of the important elements for the upcoming election, and the first thing that comes into the mind of people, those who would like to come on the elections day and participate, is security. That's why, having understood this concern, security for the upcoming election is one of the main goals and objectives of the Afghan security forces, especially the Afghan Ministry of Interior. And in the past few months, we've been working on a very comprehensive security plan for the security. And all those plans and details of this plan was shared with the Afghan people and with the IEC, the Afghan Independent Election Commission. So according to our plan and according to our estimate, the Afghan security forces, in regard to their experience of the past elections, and of course the quantity which today they will be able to provide security for almost or nearly 94% of those 6,845 polling stations that the list was given to us by IEC.
And yet 2 aides to one of the leading candidates have been murdered on the eve of the start of campaigning.
That was a very unfortunate incident last evening in Herat province. There was some lack of coordination by those officers with the police in that particular area. But of course, we are working very closely. Yesterday, the Minister of Interior met with the candidates and provided them with all the assurances and the information about the security of the election. And of course, we also requested some aid and support from their side, because the police needs to know about the activity, about the locations and addresses of their campaign offices, and many information that can help the police across the country to provide them with proper security.
Okay.
So we are still investigating to find out the motives of yesterday's attack on 2 workers of a campaign.
Okay, Ahmad, the Taliban have rejected the April the 5th election. They have promised to do their utmost to disrupt it, which is quite a threat. And as we've already seen, there have been attacks on those helping candidates. Is this going to intimidate candidates and voters?
Well, when we look at the previous election, in 2009, there was a 6-month proceeding to the election, 6 months of a campaign of threat and intimidation by the Taliban. The same that happened in 2010. People of Afghanistan showed their strength and their resolve that they have no other path but chosen to go to the poll. Of course, the numbers have gone down significantly as the turnout was lower than it was in 2004, 2005, but taking the level of insecurity and the attacks against those voters, I would say people still showed in a larger number than comparing to the level of threat and intimidation.
So do you think there's going to be a decent turnout this time round?
I do think the level of enthusiasm that I can see already around, and the amount of discussion and public discourse about the election is in a large number. But of course, security will remain one of the fundamental and biggest challenge both to the voter and to the candidates. If candidates in the coming 2 months come with an agenda, with agendas where it would motivate people, that they will see much more value in taking some level of risk, going to vote, then certainly their role in encouraging people to come out, but also encouraging communities to take a level of responsibility in providing security both of their own areas, and also to make sure that their level of cooperation and turnout and participation would prevent significant attacks on poll workers, but also on the polling stations.
Okay.
Nobody can guarantee the type of attacks that has happened in the past few months, but we do need further confirmation, further assurance from security institutions, both to organizations like us and to the general public and to the candidates. So it's a collective effort that need to reduce and minimize the impact of insecurity.
Indeed. Peter, in Dubai, it's heartening to hear the optimism of our 2 guests in Kabul about how this election will go. But in fact, this is going to be a key test for Afghan forces, isn't it? In fact, monthly attacks in Kabul are at their highest since 2008.
I think that's probably true. I shared some optimism as well, in the sense that, you know, in the early days, I remember the time around the transitional government and looking forward to the first elections which had simply never been held in the country. There weren't institutions to do it. There wasn't financing available, and there was very limited experience. And there was a lot of concern, I think, if you recall, in both prior presidential elections, that against insecurity would be a significant risk. And yet governments did emerge, cabinets were formed, and governments have been delivering services. So there's no doubt that the threats are there. On the other side, I think there are greater capabilities and experiences that existed before. But there are, as we know, there are some risks beyond the first round, a runoff in the second round, and how that process is managed, I think, is going to be absolutely critical. So there is going to be some attrition. There will sadly be innocent people who were killed. But the youth bulge, which has grown in the last 12 years, the appetite for peace, and the appetite to take a slightly different course, I think is a very slightly kind of a road partly less travelled by, lots of risk. But I'm perhaps to some extent, I think I have a higher degree of optimism than perhaps I had in previous years.
OK, well, look, let's have a look at those who are running in this election. There are 11 presidential candidates, from the lesser-known to more established political figures. Here are some of the front-runners. Former Foreign Minister Abdullah was runner-up in the 2009 election, but he pulled out, saying he feared the vote would be rigged. Former Finance Minister Ashraf Ghani also ran in 2009. A Democracy International poll in December gave him a slight lead over Abdullah in this year's race. Zalmay Rasool is a former Foreign Affairs Minister and the man backed by outgoing President Hamid Karzai. Former warlord Abdul Rasul Sayyaf represents a staunch anti-Taliban movement. And also among the better-known candidates is Abdul Qayyum Karzai, the older brother of the current president, although he's not seen as having enough experience to succeed him. Peter, arguably the best known is Abdullah. He's the man who came second in the 2009 election. It's interesting that although he's half Pashtun, he doesn't seem able to get Pashtun support. And of course, that is the majority tribe in Afghanistan.
I mean, I think there are a whole bunch of issues that we can go into with the various candidates. There are a number of strong front runners who are extremely well known. Their ideas are well known, and many people like Abdullah in particular, Rasul, of course, who's played a very strong diplomatic role, both within the wider regional community and internationally. So there are some good candidates there, and Ashraf Ghani, as you know, who the Minister of Finance in the early years, has some very strong ideas on reforming government and delivering services and opening up for regional cooperation. But amongst the individual candidates, because there is still, to be honest, there will start structural divisions within Afghanistan, finding one candidate that appeals to everybody is impossible. So coalition-based politics is what's been practiced the last 10, 12 years. And I think that's what you see, again, no perfect candidate, but again, options which are there.
Sadiq, do you agree with that in terms of the political system in Afghanistan, that there's no one candidate who can appeal across the board, across the political factions, because there are these divisions along ethnic lines?
Well, first of all, we are going to participate, and the Afghan people are going to participate in yet another election, which is really a turning point for Afghanistan and its future. This election is quite different from the elections we held in the past. This time we have more potential candidates, and they are, in fact, I can only say in comments that there are more options for the people to choose and go and elect. But this will depend for the next month to come, in which these candidates will be trying to explain what they're going to do for the future of this country. There are many good things about all of them. They are having very strong experience of the Afghan politics. There are teams that, all of them seems to be very, very committed to the future of Afghanistan.
It's interesting, the one your boss is backing, Zalmay Rasool, he's the one who has Karzai support, not his brother. Why not?
Well, I cannot talk like I can only talk on behalf of the Afghan National Forces, and I can only comment about the security issues here. I cannot agree or disagree for what you're referring.
Okay. All right. Well, let's look at some of the issues that voters are looking at. Ahmad, we were talking about security. One thing that Hamid Karzai has been favouring is peace negotiations with the Taliban. Is that universally accepted as the right move? Is that something that's going to be taken forward by a future Afghan government?
Well, there's no doubt that all Afghans do want to see an end to this war. And therefore, what President Karzai has been advocating for a peaceful solution of the current conflict is being overwhelmingly supported by majority of Afghans. Now, the methodology of this peace process has been always disputed. There are different views on the process. Some say the way President Karzai has been approaching this may have not given the kind of result that people were expecting. The new government may follow the same path as President Karzai, or may come with a different agenda in addressing the peace issue. And therefore, when you look to the current political discussion and the current elections, there's two major shifts in the dynamics of politics in Afghanistan. First, which was also alluded to by Mr. Siddiqui and Mr. Peter, where people have moved from the politics surrounded to one individual. They do want to see who is a team, how many people are coming together, and therefore it is not a vote for one individual but a vote for a team. And second major shift is what kind of agendas these candidates are going to present. That's going to be playing a significant role in the way people would look to each candidate. And therefore, the issue of peace process and also other issues that has been significant part of the gains that Afghanistan have had in the past 12 years, which major part of that will be President Karzai's legacy as we go forward, as he hands over to a next president, how people are going to deal with that. Freedom of expression and freedom of media, as an example, is one of the major ones.
His legacy may also be a breakdown of relations with the US, because he's refusing to sign this bilateral security agreement until America starts negotiations with the Taliban, or until a new president takes over. Well, let me bring in Peter. And I mean, why is he taking this stance? Is this something to do with settling scores before he goes?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's very easy to make too many assumptions about what's going on. What we do know in Afghanistan, peace in Afghanistan will be determined internally, but also within the context of the wider region. And I think any discussion about a long-term international force inevitably would involve not just discussion within Afghanistan, but wider strategic discussion going forward. So I think it's great news, obviously, that the lawyer Jirga, that there's been broad consensus around the fundamental need for a long-term presence, because there is not a plan B in this sense. But I believe the agreement will be signed fairly soon. It's hard to believe that there's not an alternative, in my personal view. And I would like to think that whilst there's a gap between the discussions in the lawyer Jirga and the actual agreement being signed, that there's probably behind the scenes some productive discussion. And so there's lots of gossip and lots of rumours. So my general feeling would be to say that it will be signed, I'm fairly sure, at some point. This process, it may be an irritant to many people, but I'm sure it's productive in some senses. OK,
let me ask you, Peter, about another huge issue, corruption. A recent report published in the New York Times says none of Afghanistan's ministries could be trusted with US funds without it being stolen or wasted.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's been a long discussion on corruption, I think, but it's, in my opinion, it's not just unique to Afghanistan. There are many other countries in the world that have those issues. And I think, as many Afghan officials will tell you, the nature of corruption is subtly different. There are also international criminal groups operating in the country. So there is a strategic question here is, whilst to secure the core functions of a government, to stabilize it, does require that the international community fiscally support the government to be able to pay its police and provide basic and essential services. There are problems of corruption. There is no quick solution. But getting the issues out on the table, increasing fiduciary standards, putting greater spotlight and pressure on it, and taking a long view, in my personal opinion, a view of 4, 5, 6, 7 years, much can be achieved during that time frame. I mean, what is the option? To stop funding government and have strategic failure, that's not an option. OK, so
let me ask Sadiq, because this relates directly to his departments. And in terms of the criticisms levelled at the Afghan government and the ministries, that money has been wasted, has been misspent, that there is corruption at high levels, what do you say to those criticisms?
Well, Corruption has been an issue, and there are progress in that regard in the Afghan ministries. When I talk about the Afghan Ministry of Interior, there are very strong measures and steps taken by the minister to curb corruption. Well, as a whole, the Afghan government, when you see today the changes and the developments in the country, this is because of that, those plans and programs which were implemented to make sure that we get rid of the corruptions. But still, that's an issue, and we are still fighting very seriously against corruption. But of course, those reports, we will have to look into the way those assistance and aids were coming to Afghanistan. And especially when you talk about the country, you know, with new institutions for the last couple of years, there might be some people and some groups who misuse those or use those opportunities for their interests. But again, the Afghan government
particular concern to lawmakers
those
in the US, because they're hearing reports every day of how funding, non-military funding, is going to Afghanistan, approximately $100 billion since 2002, and there's not much development to show for it. That's what people are worried about.
I simply think that is not true. I mean, no doubt there has been leakage of money, weak systems in part. But I remember in 2002, with not a telephone, not a dollar in Treasury, with no single operating a functional ministry anywhere, the biggest problem in my view, even if money has been ill-spent, is the failure to think that you can achieve a completely functional restructured state over a period of 1 decade. Take a long view. Look at what's going to take the next 10, 15 years. The Tokyo Mutual Accountability Framework, this decade of transformation which people talk to, acknowledge that this requires a long, structured, slow, steady approach.
Okay.
We have roads, there are education services. So
I
at
can
a cost,
see
maybe,
Ahmed
but
is
to
nodding.
say there's nothing is not true.
Let me bring it up. I mean, these are things which are very important to ordinary Afghan people. Economic growth, development, infrastructure.
Absolutely, these are the key priorities for people who are looking into the candidates' agenda and plans. There've been a study that my organization have been conducting, and the result will be soon out in terms of what people vote for and what is the order of priority. Peace is at the top. Ending corruption is second, bringing good governance is the third, and also they're talking about justice and education, of course, is the third. But then when you look to the country, to the past 12 years, people do talk about decade of transformation to come. When I, as an Afghan, grown and lived throughout all my life here, when I look to the past 1 decade and more, I see my country has already been transformed. The money, the blood and treasure, the efforts by Afghans and their international partners have already given a lot of dividends, and it has changed this country to a significant number. Now, let me start giving some examples. The Afghan government itself, when we started in 2001, there was literally not only a failed but a collapsed state. No government institution could operate. Currently, the rate of the government and its authority and its ability to deliver a minimum level of services is throughout the country, except from very few districts where they are not possible in terms of security and Taliban's presence. Look at the economic development, the level of investment that has been made in the past 12 years in Afghanistan. Of course, when you compare to the amount of aid being injected here is minimum, but when you look to the past where we were going to make a phone call outside Afghanistan and we had to travel to Pakistan, but you go throughout the most remote villages in this country, people do have a cell phone, and that creates a business and a sense of small rural enterprises in this country. We also look at the infrastructure that do exist, but all of this does not mean that we have not lost opportunities. The picture is very mixed. There were major opportunities to even further strengthen good governance. The level of tolerance of government on issues like corruption has been so big. And therefore, whoever shows an ability that takes on the major corruption issues and does not show a tolerance to them, and especially on those big fishes, is going to make a difference. There were,
Ahmed,
of course, a very complex issues.
We're going to have to leave it there. I'm so sorry. We have come to the end of the programme. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, all three of you joining us on the programme today. Sadiq Siddiqui, Ahmed Naderi and Peter Middlebrook. And you too can join the discussion. Why not tweet us? Send your comments to us at AJ Inside Story. I'm Shuli Ghosh. Thanks for watching. From me and all the team here, bye for now.